Do you say tomato? Because I also say tomato. But if you say tomato, no worries, because pronunciation does not affect how delicious today's recipe is. The first step is going to be chopping half of an onion. I usually call for a whole shallot just because I love that it's a little bit sweeter than onion, but if you're like me and you like to use up leftovers, then another onion will do just fine. When you feel like your onion is really finely chopped like this, you're gonna set it aside in a bowl. Next, we need to finely chop some garlic. I'm using 3 to 4 small to medium cloves. You can use a couple really big cloves, or you can use a full teaspoon of garlic powder. You can leave it a little bit bigger, but you might find that you get like some bites of garlic in your orzo, and I prefer not to get that, so I do it pretty fine. The tomato for this recipe comes in 2 forms. We're using a can of tomato sauce, and then we're also using about 1.5 cups or 10 ounces of cherry tomatoes. Chef's perk, you always gotta try one. Tomatoey. And then the main event is the orzo. This is a full pound of orzo. This recipe calls for 8 ounces or half of a pound. Today I'm using vegetable stock concentrate. It's super easy to store this in your fridge if you haven't cooked with it before. I love using homemade stock. I happen to have just made ramen and used up all of my stock, so today we're using the paste version. So getting the pan on the stove, turn it to medium heat. Add a tablespoon of salted butter. We're waiting for the butter to melt, and then we're gonna toss in 8 ounces or half a pound of orzo. So with that butter, give it a good crank of salt and pepper too. And then stir everything to get all of the orzo covered in that delicious butter. If it's looking a little bit dry, you can add in another half tablespoon. After all of the orzo is coated in the butter, you are just going to stir it occasionally until it starts to smell toasted. You'll know what it smells like. It's gonna smell delicious, almost like brown butter, but just like a little bit more. And then everything will be kind of a golden brown color. This has been toasting for a few minutes and pieces are starting to look golden brown on the bottom. So that means it's time to add the onion and the garlic. The reason we waited to add the onion and the garlic is you don't want them to burn before the orzo is toasted. And then stir everything to combine. And then a little trick of the trade is at the same time, it's nice to go ahead and add in a good tablespoon of the concentrate. This will help it coat everything before adding in the tomato sauce. You can see how toasted that orzo is getting. We definitely don't want it to burn, so I have my heat on low now. And then the color you're gonna start to see is from that veggie stock concentrate. The onions are just starting to turn translucent, so now it's time to cover it in some delicious sauce and get it simmering. I like to add the tomato sauce first because then I'll add water to the can to make sure I get all of that out. To your tomato sauce can, add some water. I have 2 cups here, but I like to start with about 1 cup and then swish that around, and then it should take up a lot of that. You want enough liquid to cover the orzo with about 1/4 inch of liquid. So I used 1.5 cups of water plus the can of tomato sauce. And it's already simmering, so we're gonna get a lid on this and get it covered. Before covering it, before it starts to splatter too bad, we're gonna add a good pinch of dried basil. This is completely optional, I just really like the flavor. Stir that to combine. When you're stirring your orzo, you wanna make sure you're really lifting the stuff off the bottom. So once everything is combined and you see it simmering like that, you're gonna get a lid on it, leaving a crack if you don't have a slotted lid, and then turn the heat down to medium. You don't want anything to burn. Every 5 minutes or so, I would say stir it, bring it up off the bottom, and then it's gonna be delicious. It's been another 5 minutes, so we're gonna give it a stir, and we're actually gonna taste test it this time. Everything is really close. The pasta is just above al dente, so we're going to let it simmer a little bit longer. For mixing into the orzo, go ahead and chop up about half of the tomatoes. Whoa! The other half that I call for is optional, and I like to have it on the table for serving. The pasta is done. The onions are well cooked. They just have like that slight bite to them. And so, we're gonna turn the heat off, add in half of those tomatoes that we cut in half, add in about 1/4 cup or a good handful of Parmesan cheese. Stir this to combine. With the heat off, you're gonna cover it with your lid. I would just leave it for at least 5 to let everything really meld together. This dish is pretty naturally creamy from all of the starch that comes off of the orzo, but if you're looking to kind of one-up it a little bit, there are a couple options that you can do. A great option is cream. This is heavy whipping cream, and just about a tablespoon of it for 2 servings will give you a really delicious creamy orzo. Another great option is just to add in an extra tablespoon of some delicious salted butter. And then my personal favorite is just to add in a ton of Parmesan cheese. But you could do all 3. That might be a bit heavy for a weeknight or in general, but let me know if you do in the comments below. This has been melding for a full 10 minutes. You can see that the orzo really absorbed that water, and by letting it meld, the tomatoes kind of wilted down a little bit, so they're gonna be a little bit softer in flavor, and it's gonna be really delicious. We're going to get it served up with one of those toppings that I just talked about, and then give it a taste test. I think because it's just me eating it right now, we're actually gonna do a little bit of extra butter. Okay, let's give this a taste. It's like adult SpaghettiOs, but just so much better. The tomatoes really are wilted, but so flavorful and juicy. The orzo is really perfectly al dente with that Parmesan cheese and a little bit of extra butter. It's a delicious meal. I hope you guys give this one a try, and if you have a cool pairing that you find, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video.